What's up, YouTube? Also, why is Brewmaster so shit? Actually, is it the worst tank this season? Really? People said the same thing last season and it ended up being the second best tank in Mythic Plus. So what's going on? Simple. Brewmaster is the hardest tank to play, and in the hands of a bad player, it's gonna look way worse than any other tank available. But there is a way to make it work, despite it actually having real problems still. Brewmaster's damage was just buffed recently, which addressed one of its main concerns, the threat. You would lose threat quite often as a Brewmaster, and if you are playing your rotation wrong, you will still lose threat in Mythic Plus.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Bro, where's my statue?
Why always aggro? Why always problem? Why Brewmaster shit?
Or maybe your issues with it are different and your keys have encountered other stuff, so let us know in the comment section below, because I'm curious if I'm encountering the same issues on my end. So yeah, the video addresses the Mythic Plus scenario, since in raids you won't have most of these issues anyway. But coming back to the damage, what was mostly buffed was Blackout Kick, which now does real damage. No kidding, I hit Blackout Kicks or strikes or whatever for 2.3 million damage each. I'll have something on the screen to show you, since as I am writing this, I cannot recall some of the biggest numbers yet. And buffing your Tiger Palm with Blackout combo gets out Tiger Palms that can crit upwards to 2 million per hit. And this is your spammable filler ability. The potential is there, but the issue is also inherently there. Tiger Palm is a single target ability, and Blackout Kick will only start to hit more targets if you have Shadow Boxing Threads talented, which you will, and even then it will hit only 3 targets, leaving the buffs to your damage to affect very few enemies at a time. An easy way to play this to your advantage is to target swap whenever you use Blackout Kick to make sure you damage as many mobs as equally as possible. This is a playstyle that has kind of been lost to tanks for years, since it's something not a lot of people like to do. But because of that, it feels like a cheat code sometimes for being something so basic. Rotating targets to make sure you hit everyone with Blackout Kick involves more work on your part than simply pressing Spirit Bomb on a Vengeance Demon Hunter. But this is the theme of today's video. Brewmaster is the worst tank in the game, but that's because it's the hardest to play and most people suck at it. Don't worry, I suck at it too, which is why it frustrates me so much and makes me want to figure it out and play it better, because there has to be a reason why some of these Brewmasters out there are slowly catching up to the Vengeance Demon Hunters. An easy way to maximize your DPS rotation that I have found to save me some aggro issues would go something like this, and this is not a guide, by the way. Assuming you are pulling more than one pack as a Shadow Pan Monk, you'll always want to start with Keg Smash into the pack, pop Spinning Crane Kick as you move to the next pack. This way, you can still pulsate some AoE damage while not having to face the mobs you just pulled, making sure you never let them hit you in the back, by the way. As you do this, if you have legit aggro issues, make sure you use your Black Ox statue, and I'll show you a build that can take it and lets you push keys. Although it has nothing to do with your damage, you want to pop Fortifying Brew here. Without proper buffs and procs that come around once you are in combat for a while, you are extra squishy, and I bet you have seen those tanks that jump into a pack and die in 2 seconds, wondering what happened. Don't be that tank. Rotate Keg Smashes, Breath of Fire, and Spinning Crane Kicks until you have grouped up the mobs. Pop your weapons of order and DPS trinkets, Exploding Keg, and then just focus on using your Blackout combos on Keg Smashes if you are struggling with surviving, or Tiger Palms if you want more damage, rotating targets of course on Shadow Pan. For Aspect of Harmony, you replace Spinning Crane Kicks with Rising Sun Kicks and Tiger Palms, since you have the Overwhelming Force talent for AoE damage. This shoots out the damage in a line in front of you, so you want to make sure you are facing the targets you want to damage. As a Harmony Monk, you hardly ever press Spinning Crane Kick, although it still is a useful ability to use when picking up mobs if aggro is an issue. Again, this is not a guide on optimizing damage, but rather a helpful set of tips to make sure you get the job done. Every pool is different, and depending on your party, your rotation can change. Don't get me wrong, even optimizing your damage, you won't turn any heads this season with your DPS meter. Tanks are doing probably record low damage compared to DPS specs right now. The odd Prot Warrior or Blood Decay exception is just that, an exception. Damage for tanks is relative. What matters is aggro and where the devs want the tank damage to be. They can just arbitrarily decide tanks will do 10% of the DPS of a damage dealer, but their threat is increased by 1,000,000% to compensate for it. Or they can do 90% of a DPS player's damage, but their threat is adjusted accordingly. Tank DPS is basically at the whim of where the dev design wants it to be, so all we can do is make sure we don't lose aggro. Brewmaster struggles hard with this, but as long as you are aware of your weakness, you can play around them. And yeah, I know other tanks don't have to min-max the shit out of their globals like this, but what can you do? Now, the second main issue is defensives, and here it gets tricky. You are a squishy tank. Brewmasters have been squishy since BFA or Shadowlands era, when they were the meta tank and had some big nerfs to their HP pool and stagger contribution. To be fair, the power of Stagger is something that keeps going back and forth depending on where the devs want Brewmasters to be, and it seems where it is now is where they want it to be. Stagger is very strong, and because of that, it's hard to make Brewmasters tanky without making them unkillable. Enough history lessons though, so how do you not die in keys now? The main issue with your current tankiness is that your most iconic defensive, Invoke New Zhao, is a terrible ability to get with very minimal benefits. So bad, in fact, that it has been a dead talent since early Dragonfly, if I recall. Because of how it used to work in Shadowlands, where it converted stagger damage you take into more damage you deal, it used to be an offensive cooldown. Surely not intended by the devs, and since the talent rework that we got saw it retain that functionality, it probably was nerfed too much to the point where you lose out on damage and or tankiness by picking it. In a world where your damage is atrocious to begin with, this is just not a good trade-off. Without spending too much time on this and all of these other talents that are dead and haven't been used in likely years, let me just say that it is unacceptable for a tank, or any spec for that matter, to have dead capstones and its most iconic cooldown also dead. This needs a serious rework. As for not dying now in this season, outside dungeon knowledge, tank bosser knowledge, and people not stopping casts from going through, you need to be on top of 3 things. One would be the obvious, your big defensives, as in your Fortifying Brew, your Dampen Harm, and your Diffuse Magic. Fortify Brew is a simple damage reduction. Dampen Harm is the same damage reduction unless you are taking big hits, which can be reduced for more, and Diffuse Magic is magic damage reduction, a really powerful one actually, that functions as a dispel as well. Because of how they work, they should be intuitive to use. Don't sit on them, but also don't just fire them off on cooldown. Try to time them with big pulls when you expect to take big damage and not after you take it. They can also work to offset your lack of Purifying Brews if you run out of them, filling in the gaps of your defensives. Speaking of Purifying Brew, the second thing is managing it. This changes based on key level, which means it relies on how much damage you take. You never really want to sit on it and have it off cooldown for long, but you don't want to run out of it as well and have a red stagger bar for too long, or you turn into a DPS spec at that point as far as your tankiness is concerned. If you don't know when the right time to purify is, try this simple rule. Wait until your stagger is red or maxed out and then use Purifying Brew. If you never get to that point again, it means you are not taking a lot of damage and can use Purifying Brew more freely. If you are consistently getting to max stagger very fast, you are very likely to run out of Purifying Brew soon if the pack doesn't die. At that point, use your Blackout combo buff strictly on Keg Smash to make sure you get as much cooldown reduction on Purifying Brew as you can. If you are in deep red stagger with no Purifying Brews inside, this is when a defensive cooldown can help, or simply you fucking book it out of there with a Ring of Peace roll and some Sayonara's until your healer stabilizes you, or you get some brews back. I'm not a fan of tank kiting, but as likely the squishiest tank out of the season, if you want to keep up with the big boys, it's something you have to learn to accept. The third thing, which is something I struggle at the most, is healing yourself. Expel Harm is your best friend, and in high octane situations you will generate orbs quick, so using this every few globals will make a big difference. On top of this, Celestial Brew management can also help. Works better for Harmony Monk since you get another charge of it. But if you know you are playing a key where Red Stagger is your default state, try to always Celestial Brew at 6 stacks of Purified Chi to maximize your survivability while doing the brew cooldown reduction I mentioned earlier. After tanking on everything except Prop Paladin this season, I am personally convinced Brewmaster is the most difficult tank to play and the one that has to work twice as much to do what Warriors and Demon Hunters casually use one button for. The end result is similar, however, but it doesn't feel fair sometimes. Brewmasters need a rework bad, and I'm not a master at the spec or the most knowledgeable drunk bastard out there, but some people are. Equinox, a top Brewmaster monk, made a 5-minute video explaining the issues of why Brewmaster is not a meta tank and what it would need to get there. The link is in the description, so check it out. But it does revolve around the spec needing a rework. The tankiness tuning feels off every season, the damage is either the highest in the world or the lowest garbage possible, and there are about 8 dead talents in the spec tree that have little to no usage or play in any relevant content. Or do you disagree? Brewmaster is one of the most fun tanks, despite it being unpopular, and being unpopular doesn't mean you cannot enjoy it, which is why we ranked the most unpopular DPS specs this season in this video right here, because you can still enjoy it, even if they're not meta or played enough.